Warm greetings from the high 10. It's Everyday Shenanigans. Thank you so very much. Hope you all are having a wonderful and safe weekend. I'm going to play a bit of commentary pertaining to Sherri Papini. I'm sure many of you heard of this woman out in California who faked her own kidnapping. I'm only going to play bits and pieces of this, but it will be posted to my community board for further verification. Is this a case with Debbie Collier? Was she trying to fake her own kidnapping? Who was Debbie Collier? Did she use drugs? If so, how long? Because that was mentioned in commentary. Court TV, please check Court TV and my community board for verified information. But Miss Papini obviously had mental issues as well. Faking her own kidnapping, staying with a boyfriend, inflicting harm to herself to make it look like she was abducted. So I'm going to play bits and pieces of this commentary to see if there are any type of similarities with Miss Collier, because we really don't know what happened now that someone is saying that her death is possibly not a homicide, but suicide or accident. So did she hurt herself on purpose? Was she trying to harm herself to make it look like it was by somebody else and then had an accident? Or do the police not know what they are doing? They don't have the appropriate officials working the case. Her son has been ranting to Facebook and the sheriff. He's disappointed in how they're handling the case, not consulting with him, questioning the family. He's been objecting to that, which makes no sense, because how are they to investigate if they don't talk to your family? They have to ask questions. You can't ask for privacy, but then get upset because you're not getting any information. He also brings forth allegations that the sheriff laughed at him. I don't know really who hung up on whom first. Did the sheriff hang up on him? At one point in the article, I thought he hung up on the sheriff because he felt like he wasn't getting anywhere with him. The sheriff said that they were short-staffed. I forgot to mention that yesterday during my live. They were short-staffed. So that's why information has allegedly leaked out, because he also brought forth allegations that he's hearing things, I guess, in the street pertaining to the investigation. So exactly what is it that he's hearing? He didn't mention it, and it wasn't mentioned in that article. So what has been leaked out pertaining to this investigation? That she's on drugs, or they assume she used drugs, that they see something at the crime scene or in her purse that led them to think she was using narcotics, pill popper, meth, crack, cocaine. What are we talking about? Fentanyl, what are we saying? What actually was in her purse? So you have to ask all those questions. Let's play a little bit of this commentary pertaining to Papini, and we'll get back to that. I just went in the queue. I see where Jeffrey Dahmer's father is now suing Netflix. That will be my next live later on tonight. Does he have the right to sue Netflix? Because in the end, as I told you all, everything is a version. Whatever the police brings to the news is a version, besides whatever evidence they've gathered. So therefore, they go to the news to tell you a person's name, age, race, who saw them last. Some of that's verifiable and some of it may not be. Some of it's going to be conversations from people that they know. But in the end, everything's a version. It's up to you to decide what is the truth. And then you should know there will always be things about a person you will not know. You're not going to know everything. And people are probably going to start questioning this issue with Quentin Simon. Same thing. Are these people qualified to investigate the case? One's going to say no, because they called the FBI in 3 hours afterwards. GBI just got involved in her case about 2 weeks or so ago. I can stand to be corrected. So therefore, Habersham, are you not qualified to investigate the death of Debbie Collier? We have to ask those questions now, since you've changed the narrative that possibly she died by accident or suicide. Thank you for joining me. The link is in the chat if you would like to hit the link to give your commentary pertaining to who was Debbie Collier. Let's play a little commentary about Miss Papini.
Tonight, in a collaboration with True Crime Stories and our old friend Wes Most, we're going to dig into the Sherri Papini case. I'm sure you know a lot about this case, but not as much as we know. The twists and turns are incredible. And finally, after this years-long odyssey, there appears to be resolution and justice.
Tonight, the investigation into the bizarre kidnapping of California mom Sherri Papini heating up. The Shasta County Sheriff telling us a team will interview Papini tonight, looking for any clues that could lead to her abductors.
Collect the target coins. Ooh, so pretty.
Just my luck. Always intervention. Thank you all so much for joining me.
For weeks, her face was everywhere. Photos of the pretty petite blonde woman with big blue eyes and wide smile were ubiquitous on social media. Missing posters dotted the streets of the woman's hometown of Redding, California, and on TVs nationwide, her face and name were shown ad nauseum. This was the scene when a young mother of two vanished weeks before Thanksgiving 2016. The story dominated the news nationwide, and everyone knew the name, Sherri Papini.
Sherri Papini, Sherri Papini, Sherri Papini, Sherri Papini.
On November 2nd, 2016, Keith Papini returned from work at a local Best Buy to find his home empty. A quick check revealed his two children hadn't been picked up from daycare, and his wife of 7 years was nowhere to be found. Keith ran the Find My iPhone app for Sherri's phone and showed it was somewhere near Sunrise Drive, a place Sherri had gone for a run earlier that same day. Keith drove to the spot, and there, about 2 feet off the road, he found Sherri's phone and earbuds neatly left in the dirt. The phone was playing their wedding song, Michael Bublé's Everything, on repeat, but Sherri was nowhere to be found. Keith dialed 911 to report his wife missing, and he immediately became a suspect in her disappearance.
I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit the Find My iPhone app thing. I found her phone, and it's got hair ripped out of it, in the headphones. And then I took a picture of her phone on the ground before I picked it up.
When's the last time you heard from her?
She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home for lunch. And I said, sorry, long day. And that was the last.
Do you know what you...
Detectives began a search for Papini and gathered evidence as to who or what could have caused her to disappear. It wasn't long until they found something troubling. As they dug into the 34-year-old's personal life, investigators discovered a string of oddities. The phone numbers of 2 men were found among her phone contacts, but Sherri had listed them as females. One man from Michigan traveled to meet up with Papini in 2011, and the two spent an intimate weekend together. It's worth noting that during this weekend fling, Sherri had been married to husband Keith for 2 years. They continued to exchange flirtatious text messages throughout the years, but had not seen each other in person. The two had planned to meet up again on November 1st, 2016, just 1 day before Sherri vanished. But the man told authorities he couldn't make the meeting. He ended up flying back to Michigan on the same day Sherri vanished. This made him look very suspicious. The second man told investigators,
hold on, I'm going to go back a minute.
Youth Pro 2000, and the Keith for 2 years. But Sherri had listed them as females. One man from Michigan traveled to meet up with Papini in 2011, and the two spent an intimate weekend together. It's worth noting that during this weekend fling, Sherri had been married to husband Keith for 2 years. They continued to exchange flirtatious text messages throughout the years, but had not seen each other in person. The two had planned to meet up again on November 1st, 2016, just 1 day before Sherri vanished. But the man told authorities he couldn't make the meeting. He ended up flying back to Michigan on the same day Sherri vanished. This made him look very suspicious. The second man told investigators he met Papini at a youth program around 2000, and the pair began a serious relationship. He called Papini attention hungry and said she fabricated stories of being the victim of abuse from her family, father, and later him after the couple broke up. Sherri had also run away before in the past and was known for creating false narratives whenever the focus wasn't on her. Perhaps more troubling, Sherri's own mother called the police when Papini was 21 years old to report that Sherri was self-harming and blaming it on her mother. The family lived in fear as they never knew who or what Sherri would claim was harming her in some way. Friends of Sherri would make it even more clear, saying Papini had a history of telling lies and could not be trusted.
I'm a victim.
Armed with these personal interviews and details, investigators began to suspect that the kidnapping was a hoax, but kept their suspicions to themselves. And then it happened. 3 weeks after her disappearance, on Thanksgiving Day 2016, Papini suddenly reappeared. California Highway Patrol officers responded to Interstate 5 near Woodland after multiple 911 calls about a woman wandering onto the highway. It was Sherri Papini. Her hair had been hacked off in chunks. A chain was around her waist. She'd lost weight from her already slim frame, and she was covered in bruises, burns, rashes, a broken nose, and a strange brand on her right shoulder. Bizarrely, Sherri claimed law enforcement was involved in her abduction, so she would not speak to them once found. Instead, husband Keith Papini took her statement while in the ambulance on their way to the hospital. Papini claimed to have been kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women, and she was tied up and brutalized. She described her abductors as playing, quote, that really annoying Mexican music, and complained that they only fed her rice and tortillas. The couple branded her because that's what the buyer wanted. Sherri Papini was claiming to be a victim of human trafficking. The hospital found no signs of sexual assault or traces of narcotics in Sherri's system, which didn't quite match up to her story of being drugged during her ordeal. They did, however, find unfamiliar DNA on her clothing, the DNA of a man, but no trace of the 2 women Sherri had claimed were her abductors. On November 30th, 2016, while on an interview about the case, Sheriff Tom Basenko mentioned he was relieved Sherri was found, but also made it clear they didn't fully believe her kidnapping story.
Wow.
But since Papini insisted she was kidnapped, they had to bring the case to a close. The high-profile incident began to spark numerous rumors, chief among them that the abduction was a hoax from the start. In a statement on Good Morning America, husband Keith Papini declared that rumors, assumptions, lies, and hate have been both exhausting and disgusting. He called the accusations malicious, subhuman behavior.
Sherri's husband says he is disgusted by the rumors and innuendo that the kidnapping is a hoax. Rumors, assumptions, lies, and hate have been both exhausting and disgusting. I understand people want the story, pictures, proof that this was not some sort of hoax plan to gain money or fabricated race war. I do not see a purpose in addressing each preposterous lie.
For fans of true crime who are anxiously following the story, this is when things basically went dark. According to prosecutors and the sheriff, the investigation to find Sherri and her abductors cost Shasta County state and federal taxpayers more than $200,000. Furthermore, Sherri had collected $30,000 from the California Compensation Fund, and there was close to $50,000 raised from a GoFundMe meant to bring Sherri home safe. What the general public didn't know was that this case was far from being over.
This is how residents are getting out of debt.
All right, everybody. Brief commercial break. I'm gonna pause it right there. A lot of information. The husband obviously wanted to believe his wife. Why would he not? But did he see signs that his wife was pathological? She was a sociopath. She lied. Because see, one thing you always have to remember about a person like this, they did not just wake up and start lying. They've been lying possibly most of their life, or at least somewhere in childhood, they became a pathological liar. Now, some people will pass this off as a child needing attention, some form of abuse, neglect. But what people do not understand is if the person doesn't get any help, the child now becomes an adult who is a pathological liar. And this is where people will not have any mercy on you. And I think many people have dealt with people who just lie all the time. Now, one could lie because they don't want people in their business. They don't want people knowing their personal life and what they got going on. But at some point, somebody may view that as, well, I thought I was your friend. We're close. Why can't you trust me with your personal information? Well, we know in real life you can't. So it's your interpretation on what's a lie and what's not a lie. But there's something deeply wrong with Papini. And I bring you this information to say, is it possible? Because we do not know at this point anything about Debbie Collier. Was she similar? A woman who was unhappy, miserable, bitter, depressed, drug use. And she was seeking attention when she went into that forest. Went and bought items from the store that were used at the scene of the crime, maybe to inflame herself. Because there are items that could easily catch a fire by lighting. Just a thought. Because at this point, we don't know much of anything since the narrative has now changed by two sources. Thank you for joining me.
Was that this case was far from being over. As part of the investigation, police found the DNA profile of an unknown male, discovered when their clothing was submitted for familial testing, a process that searches databases for near matches that are likely from family members. One such match was found, leading detectives to yet another ex-boyfriend of Papini's. This new finding negated all the statements Papini had given and would be the first thread pulled in a tapestry of deceit. On August 10th, 2020, the mysterious ex-boyfriend, now identified as 37-year-old James Reyes, agreed to a police interview. The two had dated up until 2006, just months before Sherri married current husband Keith Papini. The two met as teenagers and rekindled their friendship a year or so before her alleged kidnapping. Reyes said Sherri contacted him out of the blue and claimed her husband was beating and abusing her. She alleged she had called the cops for help, but they had refused to assist her. In actuality, the police have zero records of Sherri ever reporting husband Keith for abuse. Then one day, Sherri let James know she had a plan to run away with him, and she was going to need his help. The two spoke on burner prepaid phones as Sherri built Keith up to be an abusive monster. James went on to tell investigators he drove 7 hours in a rented car from his residence in Southern California to Redding, California on November 2nd, 2016. He would pick up Papini, who met him after her morning jog. While Reyes had hoped the relationship would turn romantic, it never did. Sherri took his bedroom while Reyes was relegated to the living room couch. Instead of romance, James had unwittingly become a platonic accomplice in a federal crime.
Wow.
He had no TV, so he knew nothing about the nationwide search going on for the young mother in his own home. James went on to say Papini stayed in his apartment, eating very little, cutting her own hair, and toward the end of the stay, even asked him to brand her with the crafting implement purchased at Hobby Lobby. Sherri broke her own nose and inflicted a number of other injuries by slamming herself into various fixtures in his bathroom.
Oh my Lord.
Shortly before Thanksgiving, Sherri told James she missed her children, and he drove her to the location she was eventually found, 150 miles south from where she vanished. Investigators returned to Papini's home to question her once again. Sherri was repeatedly told that lying to federal agents is a crime, and once again, she repeated her earlier story of being abducted and outright denied meeting up with her ex. On Thursday, March 3rd, 2022, 6 years after scamming the police and the public, Papini, now 39, was arrested and charged with mail fraud and for lying to a federal agent. She is looking at up to 25 years in prison for her crimes and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines.
The Northern California woman accused of faking her own kidnapping is being held without bail because she's considered to be a flight risk. Sherri Papini made her initial appearance in federal court today. She appeared virtually in a monitor. Papini was ordered to be detained until another hearing that is set to take place later this month.
All right, everybody. Ooh, mercy, mercy, mercy. Oh, Lord, help me.
Has not been charged up until this point, but he is still a suspect. It is theoretically possible that the two concocted the plan and added the racial elements to appeal to a specific crowd. Add in the fact that Sherri tempted her accomplice with the promise of a physical relationship, only to shut him down after he unwittingly aided her in her escape, and it's easy to see why some believe this was the couple's ultimate scheme from day one. Just weeks after Sherri reappeared,
Let's go back
Keith
to that.
Papini wrote him that the two concocted. Keith Papini, meanwhile, has not been charged up until this point, but he is still a suspect. It is theoretically possible that the two concocted the plan and added the racial elements to appeal to a specific crowd. Add in the fact that Sherri tempted her accomplice with the promise of a physical relationship, only to shut him down after he unwittingly aided her in her escape, and it's easy to see why some believe this was the couple's ultimate scheme from day one. Just weeks after Sherri reappeared, Keith Papini wrote himself a check for over $30,000 from the GoFundMe account to pay off credit debt, and the rest was spent on personal expenses and trips. The police have gone on record to say Sherri had more help in this scheme than just the ex-boyfriend who was questioned. Papini was warned against the consequences of lying to federal agents, but she still maintained her story. Now, with the newfound evidence, she continues to deny the mountain of proof and awaits her next court date. You have to feel sorry for her two innocent children at this point, growing up in the shadow of controversy created by their own mother and her constant stream of lies. You also have to consider the impact this will have on actual victims of these types of serious crimes. People who will be less likely to come forward because of the stigma this places on victims of violent crime. Because of the actions of Sherri Papini, who knows how many people were harmed while police were wasting valuable resources looking for a false victim. How many of those donators on that $50,000 GoFundMe will never give another dime because they were left feeling ripped off after finding out Sherri was never missing in the first place? Sherri may not have thought about any of that before, but she will have plenty of time to consider the impact of her actions while she spends time away from friends, family, and freedom in the walls of a federal prison.
All right, everybody. That is the case pertaining to Papini. I will put that in my title in case people get thrown off listening, because people surely get confused when listening to information. Debbie Collier. We don't know much about her, who she was, who her friends were, relationship with her husband, her daughter, the boyfriend, other people, neighbors, friends. What will people have to say now since the narrative has changed, shifted, pertaining to an accident or a suicide, because it's going to make a big difference. Now, excuse me, feel free to hit the link at the top of the page to give your opinion pertaining to this investigation shifting to an accident or a suicide. I played this Papini info because naturally people thought they knew her. You now hear that some believe the husband has something to do with it, that it wasn't just this new boyfriend helping, who she doused with gasoline in the end by not even having a consensual relationship with him. No sex, no affection, no nothing. He's giving up his bedroom. She's sleeping in his room. He's sleeping on the couch. So maybe it was a plan. A plan by whom? Just Papini alone, or with aid from the husband? The husband spent the money that was given to her by the state of California, the Victims Compensation Program. And it's a very, very kind gesture by the state of California to do so, because we know that there are going to be all types of victims in crime in America. So for your state to offer you anything is a very kind gesture. Now imagine how disappointing these people are for giving her the money, and then they find out the husband spent the money. So I am wondering, sir, you obviously have spit out rhetoric against a certain race, Hispanic race. I have not heard any of that commentary, but that was inferred in this video. You call people liars, making up fabrications when law officials didn't believe her. So you have to go all the way back to the beginning. What was it about her story that law said, something's not right with this story? Closed it off, closed the case. Then she pops back up. Oops, okay. Charged with lying to federal officials. That is a crime. Somebody might need to hear that in another jurisdiction in Georgia. Lying to federal officials is a crime. But of course, that person hasn't talked to anybody. So they won't be charged with that because they have yet to talk about what happened to their child. Interesting. Is this who Debbie Collier is? Partially. Just an unhappy person, seeking attention, didn't have a fulfilling life, didn't have that thrill. Because there are many people who are bored in their lives. Many of us can become bored, disgusted, disgruntled with our existence. And then we start to seek out other things to satisfy us. Papini is a very interesting case because many people have done the same. Women specifically. And now the inference that the husband was involved, spending that money, was a bad move, sir. You should not have spent that money, because that money was for the wife. But naturally, you're her husband, so you're evenly yoked. I'll spend it as I see fit. So people would question if you were involved, since you spent the money on things. Then naturally, the flip side could be, well, it's their money. They can do what they want with it, even if it was the truth that she was actually kidnapped by somebody. You'll spend the money how you see fit. It's very true. But you got to have proof that he knew of the plan. And the flip of that, the flip side of that story, having the husband involved, the husband would not have known that she was going to get the money. And she wouldn't have known that either, considering how much crime is committed in the state of California. So therefore, you really can't use that. You can't allege that, because neither one of them would know that the state would give her money. If you want to say they did it for the money. People get hurt every day. They're not paid by the state or their city. So you'd have to come up with a better excuse for why he and she would have collaborated together for her to go play possum, hide, file a false report, knowing your wife is somewhere shacked up with the man. The fact she didn't have sexual relationships with that guy, one could say this was all Sherri Papini's doing. She used him. Dated him, talked to him secretly from the husband, perhaps, and had been plotting this farce for some time. So when did she plan it? Don't know. Not to dwell on the Papini case, but I played this as a reference to Debbie Collier because Debbie Collier is no longer alive. Her son is ranting, raving with the police, sheriff, Facebook about the case of his mother. He feels like the sheriff has laughed in his face and was rude to him. He feels like the privacy of the family has been invaded, but he doesn't have a right to get upset over that because this is what happens in true crime. People want to know things about the victim. That's common sense. You can't in one hand say, well, I don't want you talking to me or my family. I don't want you asking them questions. We need to grieve. But then weeks later, you're crying to the same people saying, why won't you give me information about my mother? Well, I have to investigate in order to give you information. And naturally, if I don't know who may have harmed your mother, I can't tell you certain things. So I don't know what this boy's problem is, her son. I don't know if it's just because he's grieving. He's just out of whack, out of sorts, just talking out of the side of his head. He's just angry. Because naturally he's angry because his mother is no longer living. That's understandable. But you have to tread very carefully in who you throw accusations to and allegations to when someone is investigating your mother's death. And now that the narrative has changed, you really going to feel some type of way because no information has come back. Yes, no autopsy. So you have to wait. 6 weeks is a long time. You would think by now they would have something, unless whoever has her body or had her body at that time were backed up with other autopsies. I do not know. But the thing that was strange in the court TV's commentary, drug use was mentioned. Very strange. So what did they see to give that assumption or assertion? Because when you go to a scene of a crime, before you go into phones, iPads, or whatever was in their purse, those type of things, you see the victim whole. Hair, body, height, weight, neck, breast, all those type of things. So what did you see initially when you walked on the scene? Was she bloodied, burned in one place, burned all over, partially burned? Now we hear that she was naked. I meant to put that in my description, in my description on this video. Naked, was she on the tarp or on the ground? See, too much that just don't add up. And now you give us bits and pieces, naked body, fire near the body, items bought at the store at the scene, stomach badly burned, that you don't say that any other parts of the body were burned, grasping a tree limb, down a ravine, car still at the scene, car burned, remnants of a gas can under the car. Now everybody's asking questions pertaining to all those things that were mentioned. Hello, everybody. Happy. Thank you so much. And then we heard of things left behind where she died, gloves and such, You should not have left those things, even though people can't see it in the wilderness, but it's still disrespectful to the environment and disrespectful to the dead. What happened to Debbie Collier? Who is she? Who was she, rather? Was she a drug user? Was she having marital problems? If indeed they find out that she was using drugs, because naturally they're going to test her hair, because this is where you can find the use of drugs in the hair follicles. What happened? Who was she? Did she have financial problems? Was she mad at the world, mad at her husband, mad at her children? Strangely, all this happens right after her daughter comes to town. This is why many of us focused on the daughter, and some of us went ham due to the fact that the daughter has a negative past with drugs and allegations of lying and false reports. So naturally, you would point the finger at her, and that Venmo account is what led us to think of the daughter in a negative way, and also the boyfriend. But we only went by what you gave us. So perhaps you should never have given us the information about the Venmo account, because that threw everybody off, or on rather. Out in the middle of nowhere near home. Venmo account was the main thing you focused on because you didn't give us anything else. Then after that, you bring us information about the dollar store, and the video was released. The tag number seen going down the highway, but still a mystery thereafter. Now you bring up Chick-fil-A. She ate there before going to the dollar store. So it sounded like a person just going about their day, but no info to why the lady was out of the area. And naturally, I chopped all this up in the beginning. Who was she going to see? Did she have friends there, family there? Did somebody follow her there? Was it a hit put out on her by a family member, husband? What was the relationship with her family, friends, co-workers? Then the daughter introduced some mess about somebody on the highway that she had an accident with. But then you have to bring proof that that person found her, stalked her, whatever. Nothing. Just mainly negativity about her daughter and her boyfriend's problems, which led us to think perhaps they planned this. So then we go to, did they get in the car with her that day? Were they in the car when she went in the dollar store? Followed her back to the forest. But as I've always told you, whether you believe somebody was in the car, jumped in the car from the dollar store, the one thing you can't explain with either version, narrative, is how the suspect would have gotten out of the forest. And that's where the problem came in. Because no sane person at that time, let's say, if they were insane, or just evil, is going to hitchhike on a highway when they have access to a vehicle. So if the alleged perpetrator was in the car already with her on this journey, or jumped in the car and hid, why would they hitchhike out of there? There would be no reason to hitchhike out of there, because that means they were lurking around the parking lot looking for a victim if it was a stranger. And if it was somebody that knew her, such as a family member, husband, can't say husband, he was at work, they verified that, then the person still would have to have a way out of the forest. So how would the person be able to get out of the forest? Because it's off a major, highway. So then that means you would have had to plan that day to either ride up there with her or follow her up there with a cohort in tow. And so far, no one related to Debbie Collier has been arrested or evidence to show they have any involvement with the crime in the woods. What in the hell happened on that day? Why was she up there? Where was she going? What was her intent on that day? As I said in my video last night, Are we talking about a woman who is disturbed mentally, schizophrenic, bipolar, dissociative personality? Voices, hearing voices. Somebody's talking to her in her head, telling her to do these things to herself. Go up there, right up there. Carry these things into the woods. Set yourself on fire. Or she was lucid and planned it to make it look like somebody had abducted her, and then she got sick, hurt, fell, had a heart attack, stroke, aneurysm. Did she go up there, planned it, lucid, and was using drugs, and something caught a fire, burned herself, trying to wipe herself, had a stroke? What? Because you can't make any sense out of it. The remnants of the can makes no sense. How can you have remnants of a can? Plastic or metal? Then you ask, well, how did it get under there? She had to have thrown it under there. If we're to believe she was the only one at the vehicle, at the scene. Did she douse herself with any type of fluid and then threw the can under the car and then went back down to the ravine to light herself? But what would be the purpose of that? Because I would assume that would be a very painful way of torturing oneself or suicide. What happened? The things she had were flammable. Paper towels, tarp, tote. But why go that far, even if it's to use just the drugs? No one would drive that far just to get high. You can go anywhere and get high. The husband wasn't home. She could have gotten high at the house. So that makes no sense if we're to believe she's a drug user. Was she going to see somebody, pick up somebody, meet somebody, had friends up there, family? What? Why have you not heard from anybody else pertaining to this story? Just a disgruntled son who's angry with the sheriff. And the daughter, most of us wouldn't want to hear from her because she's too troubled to hear conversation. And when you hear that a person is known for being a pathological liar, you're not going to want to hear anything they have to say. Many people are not, because she's also a drug user. So let's go there too. Is this a generational curse? Debbie Collier was a user, and the daughter became a user because it's in the gene pool. She learned it from her mother. Was the mother at any time in her life a known user? Not secretively, not hiding behind in the closet getting high, but she was known. She had a decent looking life from appearances, nice looking house, wooded area, had a decent job. The husband had a job, but who are these people? Who were these people? One's deceased, so we say, who was she and who was the husband? He never came forth, never pled for the wife, justice for the wife. Very strange behavior. As the mod said, maybe he had an attorney and the attorney told him, don't say anything. But the thing people don't understand about listening to an attorney or listening to other people, it's still how it looks. You don't have to stay on TV all day, every day, falling out, throwing a tantrum, but you can act like you're concerned. You can always thank the public. You can always thank law enforcement for doing their job or attempting to do their job. That's just a courtesy gesture. Thank you for investigating this crime. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Georgia Bureau of Investigations. What's wrong with saying that? See, some of us become a little honorary, as if, well, that's their job. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because we already know the state only gets involved, state police, state bureaus, when the official agency needs help. They either ask or the state offers. Take your pick. But it's still rude to me to not even thank the people for trying to help. A very baffling story out of Georgia. To where you're thinking one thing because it's all they gave us. The daughter, boyfriend, husband. Perhaps. Did the son do it? But he didn't live there. Somebody she knew, somebody she dated, somebody she met, stranger. But yet they say, not random. So we went with it. Because as I said before, use deduction. You're in the middle of nowhere. The perpetrator has to be able to get away from the scene. In no way in my right mind would I believe a person that knew her or random would not use that van. That's just common sense. You are talking about rural America. Only a fool would commit a crime and then walk out of there hitchhiking. That makes no sense. Has it been done? Possibly so. But as I said, I'm weighing on the fact that a person would want to get out of there, and common sense would be to use the victim's automobile. And that's where we were also left stumped in this investigation. The fact that her vehicle was still parked. Now you're telling us it was burned. But on the driver's side of the car being put on the stretcher, on the tow truck, you don't see anything that looks like the car was burned. So was there something on the passenger side of the van? Couldn't see on that side. Was it something burned underneath the van? And naturally, you have only known about the gas can when you remove the car to tow the car. What the hell was going on with Debbie Collier? What if she came across something or ran into the wrong people while in the woods? Possibly. Never thought about that, Christina. Very good point. That's one good suggestion because that has happened to many people. They go off somewhere alone to have some me time. Young people have known to go off in the woods and parks to make out, talk, and then here comes the perpetrator and friends. And we learned that with the serial killer out in California many moons ago. Stalking couples, shooting them while making out in cars. So that's a very good suggestion. Is it possible? Yes, she went out there to do her thing, whatever that was, and met foul play. But the thing is, we don't have an autopsy to say even that. And the screwed up part is still the Venmo money sent to the daughter with the cryptic note. If indeed that is what was said. Whether you use periods, commas, it still doesn't make any sense. Because if you came to stay with your parents, you would already get a key. So why mention a key under the flower pot to get in the house if indeed she was staying in the house? Because the article that I read said they moved in with the parents. So that leads me to believe she and the boyfriend were not living in their own apartment or house. Possibly after the fact of the mother's death, they ended up getting into a rental property, but not before then. Not before they found the body of the mother, because she had just got into town the day before. The mother went missing. Very strange story. The Venmo is the start of all the gossip and the rhetoric and the assumptions. And this is what a lot of us do. We speculate, we assume. But now we're stumped because they're changing the narrative of what happened to Debbie Collier. I'm starting to question the people investigating. Do you know what you're doing? Was it odd in the beginning and you spoke too soon? Because maybe you should not have spoken about the Venmo account until you actually had sound proof of a manner of death, a trace on the phone, a trace on where the money came from and to directly, where the money ended up, who spent the money. Maybe all that should have been done before speaking, because now this does not make any sense. Very baffling story. Still, weeks in and no answer. The husband, will he now say something or still continue to remain quiet? Because I'm sure he has questions if indeed he is not involved in whatever went on in those woods. What happened to my wife? What does the daughter have to say now pertaining to this investigation? The boyfriend? How are they maintaining, sustaining? Do they work, have jobs now? Will they remain in Georgia or go back upstate or somewhere else? And as for the son, he's very disturbed, agitated pertaining to the sheriff and his interaction with the sheriff. But as I said, you can't complain about not getting information if you're the same one complaining you don't want them talking to anyone. That doesn't make any sense. That is their job to investigate. That is their job to ask people questions, their whereabouts, what they're doing, why they're here, anything about them, what they drive, don't drive, who they talk to, where they were, the relationship with the victim, the relationship with the husband. That is their right to ask you questions. You cannot say, I want privacy. We don't want to be bothered. But then when you decide to come off that horse, then it's, well, why aren't you telling me anything? Absolutely insanity pertaining to this case. Who was Debbie Collier? Was she an active drug user? What will her co-workers have to say now with this new narrative? Suicide, accident. Does someone have actual knowledge, receipts of her being a drug user? If so, how long was she using? How was she as an employee, worker, boss, if indeed she was over someone? How long did she work for this company where she worked? What was her relationship like with her husband? Were they in separate rooms because of his sleeping patterns, or they had marital issues? Did they have consensual sex with each other, although they slept in separate rooms? If not, how long have they not been having sexual relations? Were any of them having affairs? Discord with other people in the family, friends, neighbors, job. Did they get along, Mr. Collier and Mrs. Collier? Did they have a lot of friends? No friends. People come to the house. Nobody visit. What are we saying? And once again, why did the daughter and the boyfriend come down to Georgia to move? Why did they leave the house living with the brother? What does the brother have to say about that? Someone in the chat made a comment about the boy had the mother blocked. If that is true, why? And if so, why? And when did you unblock her, if true? This is why I don't like repeating allegations when I don't have a receipt to anything, because this is what got us in this mess with the Venmo information from the police. But this is what they wanted to reveal to us, and it caused a stir. and gossip and assuming the worst about the daughter. That's why you have to be careful about what you release to the public. Because then her past came up, and then it went on from there. He said, she said. Did she have other friends, family in the general area where she was found? Will there be somebody to finally come forward to say, yes, I talked to her that day. We were going to meet. We met for lunch, or we were supposed to go out or shopping. Where are her friends, girlfriends? Did she have any girlfriends? Why was she up there dining and shopping in a dollar store? Did this woman have mental problems and she went up there to kill herself or attempt to make it look like a false assault and false kidnapping? But it went awry because she set herself on fire accidentally. What is the truth pertaining to the death of Debbie Collier? Will somebody come forward with the truth of who she was as a person? Or will we stay in limbo and never know? And sometimes that happens in a investigation. You don't find out things because people covet and don't reveal the truth. And when you have people who don't want to talk to the police and cry and moan that they want privacy, you will start to wonder if these people have something to hide, that they didn't want the truth to come out about the parent. They just want to feed investigators what they want them to know, but yet moan and groan about the investigation not being solved, not getting new info. What was released to the public by the police department pertaining to this investigation? Did you leak out information pertaining to the crime scene, her habits, what was in her purse, her relationship with her daughter, boyfriend, the husband? Who was doing the talking? The sheriff gives a lame excuse that they were short-staffed and this is how the information got out, but then that makes no sense because if you short-staffed, then there shouldn't have been anybody talking to release anything. So what is the truth about that? Did somebody intentionally tell personal things to the public pertaining to Debbie Collier's death? How do you know she was using drugs? Did she have drug paraphernalia in her purse, in that van, on her persons when you found her? Crack pipe, aluminum foil, pills, needle, syringe, rubber band tied around the arm. What did you find to lead yourself to think she was a drug user? And once again, if it is confirmed that she had drugs in her system at the time of death, what was the drug and how long has she been using? And is the husband a user? Is this the reason why her daughter is a user? Very interesting information. And explain how you have remnants of a can under a car. Because I've never heard of such. Pieces, half of a can, what? Nozzle, what? So one's going to say, well, if you have remnants, where are the other parts of the gas can? Where are they? Down at the ravine where her body was? Why that location? Why did she go to that off-beaten path down a ravine? For what reason? If there were no other people involved, why go down there by yourself? Dangerous. Could have hurt yourself, fallen down, broken ankle. Is that what happened? But remnants were found at the scene of like pieces of paper, cardboard. So somebody set the fire down there, and that's also was said, that there was a fire near her. So was it set by somebody else? She went to be alone for some reason, mental issues, schizophrenic, went in the woods, and then she got company. Someone joined her unexpectedly. Caught off guard, had a struggle, hit her over the head, strangled her. What? Pulled all her clothes off, sexual assault. Will we find out she was sexually assaulted? Because why was Debbie Collier naked? Why was there a fire at the scene? What in God's name happened out there? If you'd like to donate to this great network, $McAngie 129 Cash App. All stickers and chat to welcome during my lives. If you see something, say something. Be a part of the solution and not the problem. Mind the children. Mind the adults as well. Please have a safe week. I will have more commentary this evening pertaining to Jeffrey Dahmer's father. He is now suing Netflix for the content in the documentary. There has been many videos made since that Netflix program aired. People curious about the content, who said what, who did what, who witnessed what is truth, not truth. As I've told you before, a story is just that, a story, a version. It is up to the people who spin the web pertaining to what allegedly happened. And there's going to be some truth. There's going to be some falsified information. There's going to be things left out. There's going to be things coveted. There's going to be things hidden. And we learned that also about Mr. Lionel. I find it funny you want to sue Netflix, but you lied in the beginning of this investigation pertaining to your son. When this lady asked you on Inside Edition, did you see the signs that your son was an alcoholic? You said no. And then later, 30 plus years later, there's a documentary where you're saying, in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, that you and your wife sent Jeffrey to live with your mother because he was a drunk. So you lied. You lied. Because that woman specifically asked you in the early 90s, did you see your son come home drunk from school? You told her no. No, I did not. So then why would you in the documentary 30 years later tell someone that you sent him off, you and your current wife at that time, sent him to live with the grandmother because of his alcoholism? So now one could say, if you would lie about him being drunk, visually seeing him drunk, smelling him drunk, then how would you have the nerve to question what was put in the documentary pertaining to your son? And what claims do you have that is deemed false to you about what was said in the documentary? The presentation itself, the allegations in the documentary, the people's assessment in the documentary. Because in the end, you can't sue for what somebody said happened pertaining to their interaction with Jeffrey Dahmer, because that's between the living and the dead. And if you were not there living in the apartment building or any other type of relationship that he had with said people, you cannot say what he said or what they said or did with and to one another. So what are your allegations against Netflix? That's my next live. Thank you for joining me. Have a prosperous week. God bless all of you. Please stay safe. This is Everyday Shenanigans. Thank you.